What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Trent and welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I am back with another installment of the Round Recap podcast, turning our attention to the round that was in round 19 of the 2024 AFL home and away season. If you are new around here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Just to surmise what this recap podcast is all about, it's in the title. It's pretty self-explanatory. We sit down the week after a weekend of football and dissect everything that went down that particular weekend. And as I've already stated, round 19 is where the conversation point is going to be had this week. There is some fallout to deal with. There is some deep dives and analysis to be had. And as harsh as it may sound, this round I feel could very well be called pretenders versus contenders, because we had the cream of the crop rise to the top while others failed to deliver in a season that is still very much open for a lot of teams to make that top 8 push. And with only a handful of games left in the season, we are finding some teams are rising to the occasion and some teams are getting found out in a rather big way, which leads us to the first game of the round, which was on Friday night last weekend at the it was at Marvel Stadium rather, not the MCG. I almost slipped up already. We've only just started. But it was at Marvel Stadium with Essendon hosting Adelaide. Now, if we rewind and flash back to earlier in the season when Adelaide played host to Essendon, we know how that game ended in controversy. We know that Sam Draper, at least in my opinion, and in the viewpoint of many others, dove on top of a loose ball. Taylor Walker came in for the tackle. Should have probably been held accountable for holding the ball, giving Tex Walker a free kick in front of goal to ice the game for Adelaide. Wasn't called. Jokes were made, memes were made, comments have been made, and Essendon escaped with a very narrow win. This, I feel, had redemption written all over it, and ironically, I spoke about it in my tipping video, and I'm going to allude to it here in the podcast. PointsBet all season have been running a campaign where they will give better odds for a certain team to get up and win. All but one time, when they have given better odds on a team, that team has gone on to lose. And heading into this particular round, I mentioned that PointsBet were offering about $7, $8 odds for Essendon to win. So if that was the case and the hoodoo was going to be in effect, Adelaide would win this game. Now, it's just purely coincidental that that is how the story of the tape has been all season with this PointsBet, bar one game. But that's the outcome we got. And I don't know whether this outcome speaks more about the rise of Adelaide and the potential Adelaide has that truly hasn't been unlocked this year and the consistency that has wavered, or Essendon's inability to finish off games strong, and whether or not when competing against teams that are probably in the pocket to compete, that they're not competing as well as they should be. They're not rising to the occasion. It brings question marks again about the fact that majority of the wins Essendon have taken out of the season this year comes from the bottom 4 teams, and Adelaide is still in the crop of that bottom 4. They're in the bottom 5, and it really begs the question as to where this level of gameplay, I suppose, if you want to call it that for lack of a better word, has been for Adelaide for the vast majority of the year. And on the flip side, Essendon have been in many positions this year where they should put teams away and they've faded, and it is this game in particular that fade out cost them a win. And they had their chances. I mean, very late in the game, Essendon had 2 shots on goal, or two attempts near their goal, close enough within the space of probably a minute or two, where they could have sunk the win. And it was just a little bit upsetting for, at least for Essendon fans and for people that backed Essendon in like I did, to see them squander yet another opportunity. And this is a team that, for the vast majority of the year, at least for the back end of the year, has been touted as a top 4 team, and they're going to finally break their finals hoodoo. They're at a real risk of now dropping out of the top 8 completely, which would have egg on a lot of the Essendon supporter base, faces collectively. Looking at this match and breaking the timeline down, it was an arm wrestle that really probably should have been dead at halftime if Adelaide were a true contending team, given at quarter time the scoreline was 5 points the way of Essendon, 3 goals 2, playing 2 goals 3. At halftime, Adelaide had turned it up in that second quarter, and they led Essendon 11 goals 4, 70 to 7-5, 47. So going in with a 23-point buffer, you would have thought Adelaide would have come out refreshed, ready to go, kill shot in sight, ready to absolutely go ham. Essendon, however, managed to rally a huge quarter of their own, going from 7 goals 5 to 15-8, 98, and Adelaide moving from 11-4 to 13-10. Now, that's also a tale of Adelaide's tape, because Adelaide have been notoriously terrible in front of goal, and it shows in a reflection of a quarter where they went on to kick 2 goals 6 versus Essendon coming out and managing to secure 8 goals 3 for the quarter. But for the rest of the game, Essendon then went on to kick 2 goals 3, and Adelaide went on to kick 4 goals 3. Very hard-fought contest in the end, but Adelaide just getting it done when it mattered most. And again, it begs the question to where this consistency has been for Adelaide, where this level of gameplay has been for Adelaide. This is a team that I believe went in without Taylor Walker. I would have to have a look at the list just to make sure I am not rudely mistaken, and I am not. So it's another week, yet again, no Taylor Walker in the Adelaide lineup, where they have opted to play Riley Thilthorpe. Now, Thilthorpe came out and kicked another 2 goals this weekend. He's looking really good. He's coming out looking like a lumberjack. He's built big. He spent his whole recovery time with his injury in the gym, stacking on weight and building his body mass. He looks like a fucking unit. And I said it in last week's podcast, and I'm going to reiterate it again today. I think the writing is on the wall for Adelaide and Taylor Walker. I think they've now proven with their forward mix-up here, they don't need Taylor Walker anymore. And it's going to be the end of an era, because there isn't many Adelaide players left within the mix from that 2017 grand final where they lost to Richmond. I think Taylor Walker may very well be one of the only ones left, apart from Rory Laird, Ben Keys maybe, but there's a lot of young kids now coming through their system that are starting to stand tall, and they're showing that they can outperform that of what a Taylor Walker has done, especially going off of the back of the huge year that Taylor Walker had in 2023, transitioning into this year, shadow of his 2023 self. Essendon, on the flip side, you still have the core brigade of the usual suspects standing up and getting it done. But outside of that, it's where the inconsistencies of some of their big name players have fallen over the last couple of weeks that I think has really had them struggling. When you have a look at the breakdown of the fact that Jake Stringer only has 9 touches, he kicks 1 goal for the game. Again, this is a guy that has been kicking 3, 4, 5 goals a week and has been somewhat of a barometer for Essendon. So it's no surprise when Jake Stringer hasn't been firing, Essendon have struggled in front of goal. This game in particular, Ben Keys comes out for Adelaide and kicks 5. That's the same amount of goals. Actually, did he have any blemishes on the day? He had 5, so he kicked 5 goals, 1. That's more scores collectively than turning your attention to Essendon and seeing Kyle Langford only kicking 2. Stringer only kicked the 1. I'm pretty sure Harrison only kicked 2, I think. So Ben Keys has come out as this kind of, I wouldn't even know if he's a midfielder, if he's a forward, if he's a hybrid, but this player that has been very unlikely this year, that has stood up tall, and he's kicking bags bigger than collectively the core offensive unit of Essendon as a whole. That's impressive as hell. And I think the issue that Essendon are now starting to run into is they had such a hot year, especially in the beginning. all of their players probably overperforming to some degree. And now that they're starting to come against teams that, well, Adelaide's not even in that premiership or finals kind of window, but the last few weeks they've been found out, and some of their senior players haven't been standing up and taking charge as they should. And I feel if this was a bottom-dwelling team, they would be getting dragged over the fucking hot coals. I mean, if this was Richmond, I know for a fact there would be some media journalists having an absolute fucking field day. So I don't know why there isn't any conjecture being spoken about Essendon's drop-off. There was a meme made by Dan Gorringe this week talking about the biggest slides in the world, and the number 3 biggest slide is Essendon out of the top 4, almost missing the top 8. I thought that was hilarious. So there's memes starting to go about, there's conversation now starting to go about, and for a team that isn't leaving Melbourne for the rest of the home and away season, you'd think that they were comfortably in the pocket to make a finals appearance, but the door is so wide open to teams around them that losing games like this could come back to bite them in the arse. With that being said, it is time to turn our attention to my best on ground votes for the Hip and Shoulder MVP award for the 2024 season. And if you've been following these podcasts, you would know what this MVP award is. And if you haven't been, I'll give you a quick rundown now before we continue on through. This is a 3-2-1 vote system, very similar to the Brownlow. I choose best on ground to get 3 votes, then second best gets 2, third best gets 1. There's obviously going to be some players that are going to be missed because this is a very objective list, given it's my own opinion. So it opens up discussion for you guys in the comments to let me know who you felt was best on, if you thought I did harshly by players. I love creating conversation and building a community of like-minded AFL enthusiasts and passionate supporters. I feel conversation needs to be had if we're going to grow into something much, much larger and much more passionate than what we truly are. So do let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are of the games, whether I've correctly identified the best players. If I haven't, by no means are any of these players probably ever going to know I've done this, and I'm not doing this for any kind of recognition. This is just something to afford myself the opportunity to impart my own opinion on games, and again, create discussion point, open discussion, and just have a bit of fun with what we're doing. That's what I want. I want fun vibes. I want to have a good time. So for this particular game, there were a handful of players I could have probably raffled off here for the 1 vote. There's a few that I probably, I don't know. There's a few here that I'm starting to look at now, and I pivoted last week, and I'm going to make a pivot again. Originally, I had Sam Durham in for the 1 vote. He had 27 disposals at 74% disposal efficiency, 12 contested, 618 metres gained, 8 clearances, 3 marks, the 1 goal, 7 score involvements, and 5 tackles. But I think looking at the game as a whole, Rory Laird probably deserves the 1 vote here. So I'm going to give it to Rory Laird. 29 disposals at 69%. Hey, disposal efficiency. 11 contested for 267 metres gained. Makes a lot of sense given that 18 of the 29 were handballs. 7 clearances, 2 marks, 8 score involvements, and 7 tackles on the day. The 2 vote I gave to Zach Merritt, who I still feel is having a very underrated season and is very much a Brownlow Smoky and should still be in conversation for the All-Australian captain, even though now all the conversation for both the Brownlow and All-Australian captain has shifted quite immensely to Marcus Bontempelli from the Bulldogs and Patrick Cripps from Carlton. But Zach Merritt had 30 disposals at 60%, 13 contested for 771 metres gained, 8 clearances, 1 mark, 1 goal, 11 score involvements, and 5 tackles on the day. But I think the biggest by far kind of individual effort was Ben Keys. 22 disposals at 77% disposal efficiency, 12 of those contested for 544 metres gained, 5 clearances, 2 marks, 5 goals, 12 score involvements, and 8 tackles. This guy is a pressure machine. I feel he is very underrated as a player. I'm surprised Brisbane coughed him up as easily as they did, because I could only imagine how Brisbane would be running around now with both Keys and Dunkley running around as players that can play brilliant shutdown roles. Who knows whether Dunkley even makes it to Brisbane if Ben Keys was still there. I think those three players above all were probably the better players on the day. Honourable mention to Kyle Langford, who had 22 disposals, kicked 2 goals, and had 9 score involvements. Nick Martin had 22 disposals with 7 score involvements and 6 tackles as well. And probably Andrew McGrath, 23 disposals. He had the 4 score involvements, 5 tackles. So it wasn't without effort. It's just Adelaide on the day were just up to the challenge more. They wanted it more, and they got the result they were hunting for. At NG Stadium on Saturday afternoon, GWS played host to the Gold Coast, and we know what the tale of the tape has been for Gold Coast all season. Undefeated at People's First, on the road, they are yet to get a win. And that moniker continues to happen because GWS ran away with a 39-point win in this game and never looked like the Gold Coast were going to come back and upset GWS in any way, shape or form. At quarter time, GWS could not miss. 5 goals straight, played 2 goals 4. They shifted into half-time, 8 goals 1, leading 4 goals 9, so a lot of missed opportunity. Gold Coast had the chance and absolutely squandered it. At three-quarter time, GWS led 10 goals 3 to 4 goals 11, and then by the end of the game, 14-5-89 defeated 6-14-50. What it could have been if Gold Coast had chosen to kick straight. And when we turn our attention to the stat line of this game, we can see who the contributors were, who the people on the shit list should truly be. Ben King for the Gold Coast had 8 disposals. He ran at a very impressive 12% disposal efficiency. He had 4 marks and kicked 3 behinds. Lockie Weller had 16 disposals at 50%. He went on to kick 2 behinds. Ben Long had 7 disposals at 28%. He went on to kick 2 behinds. Lloyd Johnson, 6 disposals at 16%. He kicked 2 behinds. Jed Walter, 6 disposals, 16% disposal efficiency, 1 behind. Matt Rowell had 20 and only ran at 50% for 1 behind. Bailey Humphrey cleans up the disposal efficiency at 76, but he only kicks 1 behind. It blows my mind that the inaccuracy, especially given the talent of some of those names, like Ben King, he's been lauded as the figurehead of this team. He's been called a future premiership key forward and identified as one of the key components to Damien Hardwick's succession plan in taking over and winning a grand final in the next 3 years. Not when fucking Ben King's kicking like that, he fucking ain't. Having a look though, there were some huge efforts from the Gold Coast on the day. Unfortunately, the disparity between their best and their worst was way too far between, and when you've only got 4 players for the Gold Coast that had more than 20 disposals on the day, that speaks volumes considering some of the numbers we've seen these players put up. On the flip side, GWS finding a way yet again to put back solid wins, and I feel they're starting to get their mojo back. When you have a look at how they started the year, they had that period where they dropped off. They've really reclaimed that form prior to that purple patch they had where they really started to drop off the face of the earth and people started questioning whether or not they'll play finals this year. If they can finish within that top 8 configuration, I think they could do a lot of damage, and I feel GWS probably alongside Fremantle are the 2 teams that people should be watching come that finals berth, because they're both teams that not many people have been paying much mind to because of their wavering consistency this year. But I definitely feel when the iron is hot and they can strike hard. I don't think there was much to report out of this game at all. I'm going to have a look at the match report just to see whether there was, because I do, as I've identified, I watch every game of football every weekend, but it's hard sometimes to recollect whether there was anything to report. Isaac Cumming for GWS did do a hamstring in this game, which was unfortunate because Isaac Cumming's been huge for GWS. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward with him out of the team and how long that hamstring is going to have him sidelined for. But having a look at the players that I want to identify as best on for this game, I wrestled between the top 3 and their configuration on this list here. I landed on these. You could probably raffle the 2 vote and the 1 vote around, but I have configured it as such given how the teams performed and identifying that GWS was the winning team and just being a little bit realistic. As my chair squeaks, I do apologise. This chair needs some WD-40 or some fucking shit, I don't know. I gave Tom Green the 1 vote, 34 disposals, 64% disposal efficiency. He had 10 contested for 633 metres gained, 5 clearances, 4 marks, 4 score involvements, and 7 tackles. The 2 vote I gave to Sam Flanders, 43 disposals at 79%, 11 contested for 555 metres gained, 9 clearances, 7 marks, 6 score involvements, and 2 tackles. With best on ground, and I've said it every time this guy gets a vote, he is having a career best year and he's really hitting his peak. Lockie Whitfield, 40 disposals at 80% disposal efficiency, 9 contested for 780 metres gained, 2 clearances, 10 marks, 4 score involvements, and 5 tackles. That wasn't without some honourable mentions by David Swallow, 28 disposals at 78%, 6 score involvements and 2 tackles. We had a solid effort from Finn Callahan, 21 disposals at 90% disposal efficiency, 4 score involvements and 4 tackles. Connor Iden had 27 at 96% and he had 4 defensive marks. Perryman had 26 disposals at 88% with 8 marks and 5 score involvements. It's a good even spread for GWS, and that is where the disparity comes from. GWS had a lot of people willing to rise to the occasion and stand tall. Gold Coast had a few put their hands up and others went kind of missing, and I reckon Damien Hardwick was peeling paint off of walls. Marvel Stadium, St Kilda played host to West Coast, and this was a game that unfortunately probably had writing on the wall before it even started, given the fact that West Coast travelled with no Jeremy McGovern, no Elliot Yeo, no Jake Waterman, no Liam Duggan. They had a lot of their senior, more experienced and, let's face it, more talented players missing. And the scoreline reflects that quite severely. 17-11, 113, defeated 6-5, 41. It was a close contest at quarter time. St Kilda only led by 7 points going into that, well, no, sorry, not 7, 9 points rather, heading into that first break. At half-time, they led 7-5 to 4 goals for. The game was still there to be won. But St Kilda ran off with the game as West Coast ran out of legs. And I made a comment on social media this week about it only taking St Kilda to play a bottom 4 team to kick a winning score, and that rubbed some people the wrong way. I just want to identify the fact that I said that was due to the fact that we've seen games this year where they've struggled to kick a couple of points a quarter, or they've only been able to kick, you know, scores between 40 to 60 points for a game, and yet they've come out here, put on 113. They could very well come out this coming weekend and only put up a 40 or a 50, and that's where the disparity comes from. And obviously playing, I think they had no Ben King again. Liam Henry has gone down with damage to his left knee, which will see him miss the rest of the season. He has been a live wire for St Kilda, probably a shining light in a very down year, so it's sad to see him go down. I don't think King played this game. I think he is out still. So the big probably point I want to touch on here is the fact that when opportunity opens itself up to somebody and somebody takes it, it makes you question whether or not things like St Kilda potentially looking at a 10-year deal for Max King is worth it, because Tim Membry comes out and has opportunity to play here, plucks 10 marks, kicks 5 goals, has 10 score involvements, lays 7 tackles. When you've got someone like Tim Membry, like, I know Tim Membry's much older than Ben King, but when you've got somebody coming out and putting on an effort like that, I don't understand where the need for having Ben King, who goes missing more often than not, is truly needed. Especially if they can get value for him by facilitating a trade. They can find, you know, opportunity to find a full forward elsewhere. They've got plenty of tools that can play that role already. especially through their VFL system. So I don't know whether Max King's still the man. I don't know. We're going to move on because I don't want to dwell on it too much, because I'm very bullish on Max King as a player, and I don't want to come across as being too harsh. I did just identify Tim Membry, so we're going to move on to the best on for this game, which is a clean sweep with St Kilda players given the scoreline. I will give honourable mentions, however, to Jaden Hunt. 35 disposals at 82% disposal efficiency, 12 contested at 723 metres gained, 3 clearances, 8 marks, 5 score involvements and 2 tackles. Next best for West Coast was Tim Kelly, 24 disposals at 83%, 12 contested for 294 metres gained, 5 clearances, 5 marks, 3 score involvements and 4 tackles. And a couple stiff to miss for St Kilda here, looking at the list. Probably Sinclair, 31 disposals at 71%, 17 contested, 371 metres gained, 4 clearances, 7 marks, 8 score involvements and 2 tackles. The one vote I landed on was Jack Steele, 31 disposals at 77%, 9 contested for 497 metres gained, 3 clearances, 9 marks, 1 goal, 7 score involvements and 5 tackles. The 2 vote I gave to Tim Membry, 23 disposals at 60%, 11 contested, 436 metres gained, 10 marks, 5 goals, 10 score involvements and 7 tackles. I'm giving best on ground to Rowan Marshall, and I feel Rowan Marshall has had a very underrated year this year, especially when you look at some of the numbers he's putting up for a ruckman. 26 disposals at 61%, 16 contested for 447 metres gained, 24 hitouts, 10 clearances, 5 marks, 4 score involvements and 3 tackles. His clearance and pressure work around the contest has been superb this year, and while conversation point is always about Max Gawn being the best, I've really loved the performances of ruckmen like Rowan Marshall, Tristan Cherry, Kieran Briggs, Toby Nankervis, those ruckmen that love getting down and dirty, find a lot of clearance ball, lay a lot of tackles, they're down on the ground getting a lot of clearance work. I can applaud Max Gawn for being that ability to move forward, move back. He intercepts the ball very cleanly. He can be like that figurehead to shift the ball. But I very rarely see Max Gawn down on the ground getting his hands dirty. That could be probably me being a little bit harsh, but I really loved how Rowan Marshall went about it in this game. MCG painted a perfect picture for Hawthorn taking on Collingwood in a game that I gave Collingwood every chance to win this game, and I said in my tipping video, this game for both clubs was probably a doom or gloom scenario, in the situation where the winner goes on and keeps their finals chances alive. The loser probably closes the door marginally on their finals chances. If you had told me that the Hawks were going to come out and win this game by 11 goals, I would have told you were crazy. They've been playing good, don't get me wrong. They elevated to a whole new fucking level in this game, and it was the best game I've ever seen Jack Ginnivan play ever. He has caused a lot of stir and commotion this week, and I feel it is justified to talk about it, because when he played at Collingwood, everybody fucking hated him except for Collingwood fans. Collingwood fans loved the carry on and the taunting, and everybody was questioning it. Kane Corns got stuck into him, other media personalities got stuck into him, neutral supporters and opposition supporters got stuck into him. He comes out in this game and delivers some of the best taunting I've seen in a very long time, especially directed to the Collingwood fans. And everybody has come out and said how much they love Jack Ginnivan and they love the carry on all of a sudden. Is that reflecting more on the fact that they didn't hate him at Collingwood as a player, they just hated Collingwood and they love to hate Collingwood? Is that really where we're at? Because I think that is where the reflection has truly come from. I don't know whether if he was still playing for Collingwood and doing the carry on like he did, whether we would be having a conversation saying, oh, that's great to see him having, so much personality. It's a great conversation point. Let's talk about it in the comments down below. But at quarter time, it was anyone's game. 3-3, Hawthorn led, Collingwood 1-4. Collingwood very inaccurate in this game early, and it cost them, because at halftime, Hawthorn led 7-8 to 1-11. After that fact, Collingwood went on to kick 8 goals 2 for the game. Hawthorn, after half-time, went on to kick 12 goals 5. Very accurate second half versus a very inaccurate first half by Collingwood, and Collingwood probably closed the door on themselves here. As I said, I did not expect this blowout to come. I thought, even given the scoreline at half-time, Collingwood were a chance because we've seen them come back from worse, but Hawthorn just put pedal to the metal and never looked like they were going to be giving up. Nathan Kruger subbed out of this game with concussion for Collingwood. I don't know whether that played any part in really the outcome. It happened early, but Nathan Kruger isn't really a match winner. He's more of a role player for Collingwood. That's the only thing to really come out of this game in way of injuries or anything like that. But as I said, when you look at the stat line here, it was Jack Ginnivan all day, every day. But you have a look at the top performing players of the game and you run down the stat list and it's just Hawthorn everywhere. And when you do find Collingwood players, it is no surprise that the first 4 you see are Nick Dacos, Josh Dacos, Jack Crisp, and Scott Pendlebury. And even then, Nick Dacos had the better of the 4 with 24 disposals, but only ran at 58%. Josh Dacos had 22 for 50%. Jack Crisp had 22 for 54%. Scott Pendlebury had 19, 52%. Braden Maynard, for that fact, had 18 at 55%. It's hard to look at, especially when you look at the performance of the Hawthorn players and the efficiency they ran at. It really just, it spells the story out for you. When you look at the score line and then you look at the stats, there's no disparity between the two. You can clearly see why one team was better than the other. When it comes to the votes, it is a clean sweep for Hawthorn. The one vote I am giving to Massimo D'Ambrosio, who I feel he hasn't been the recruit of the year, but he has been one of the better recruits, and I am still so upset that Richmond didn't pick him up in the mid-season draft when we had the chance to do so ahead of Essendon. He was in our VFL system, and we tried masking a arm injury in hopes that nobody would pick him so he would slip and we'd be able to pick him up with our second pick. Didn't happen that way. Essendon scooped him up with their first, and the rest is history. But he had 26 disposals at 73%. He had 3 contested, 396 metres gained, 1 clearance, 6 marks, 2 goals, 6 score involvements, and 4 tackles. The 2 vote I gave to Dylan Moore. 27 disposals at 74%, 13 contested for 438 metres gained, 1 clearance, 4 marks, 10 score involvements, and 3 tackles. Best on ground by a country mile, and everybody has identified it, was Jack Ginnivan. 31 disposals at 67%, 11 contested for 417 metres gained, 4 clearances, 5 marks, 2 goals, 1, 11 score involvements, 5 tackles. Stiff to miss, but noteworthy on the day, James Sicily, 30 disposals at 76% with 6 marks and 4 score involvements. James Warple, 28 disposals at 60% with 10 contested, 5 clearances, and 7 score involvements. Sorry, I got caught up in the stats. And Will Day, 26 disposals at 80%, 7 contested, 5 clearances, 7 score involvements, and 8 tackles. He could have very well been in the mix for the 1 vote, but I think D'Ambrosio, having the 2 goals, the 6 score involvements as well, marginally put him ahead of Will Day. Down at the Cattery, GMHBA Stadium, we had a very tantalising matchup that saw Geelong hoping to solidify a top 4 position, with the Western Bulldogs remaining in the hunt for a top 8 finish. Before the game even started, Tom Atkins and Shannon Neal were late outs, replaced with Brandon Parfitt and Ted Clohessy. Now, I personally argue if Tom Atkins had played this game, we may have well had a different outcome, because Atkins is a brilliant lockdown player. When I say it would have changed the outcome, I still think the Bulldogs would have won. I think the margin would have been a lot closer in the way of Geelong. But this was an impressive start-to-finish performance by the Bulldogs in a game that they never looked like they were going to lose at all. Quarter time, it was still probably anyone's game at quarter time, given the scoreline. I mean, Geelong only managed to kick 2 behinds for the quarter versus 2 goals 3. We know the Bulldogs, though, historically have been a slow starting team. At halftime, 2 goals 3 played, 4 goals 10. Again, tail of the tape of being low scoring, but also the Bulldogs have kicked themselves out of so many contests this year. It is not funny, and it looked like they might have opened the door for an upset after halftime. But they put the foot down and they managed to stem the flow, and they led the entire game, and deservingly so. It was a game that was played in incredibly cold conditions. I thought it was almost hilarious and comical in the fact that they cut to footage of Luke Beveridge in the coach's box having to wipe his forearm across the window. It was that cold that the window was fogging up out of that sheer coldness, and he couldn't see the ground. It was a very sloppy ground as well. There was a lot of residue on the field. It was there's footage and photos going around of one of the Geelong players covered in mud, and people are making memes about him shitting himself and stuff. Fucking hilarious stuff. But it was not hilarious for the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs came down with something to prove, and absolutely proved that fact. If anything, the joke here is Geelong, because they yet again find themselves in a precarious position where they looked at locking up a top 4 spot, and now they are still probably at risk maybe of missing the top 8 completely as well. It's so hard to imagine that this team had that dominant start to the year, and dickheads like myself made comments early on. It's hard to see Geelong missing the top 4 from here. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that, and Geelong fans are going to fucking drag me for it. Looking at the stats for the game, picking the best on, probably easier to identify than most. There were some players probably stiff to miss. I mean, Marcus Bontempelli doesn't get a vote from me this week, only because his disposal efficiency let him down and he wasn't as impactful as he could have been. He did have 27 and 19 of those were contested, but he only ran at 51%. He did have 8 clearances. He had 7 score involvements and 5 tackles. So still a big game, but I mean, when you look at the efforts of the players around him, disposal efficiency aside for one of those, because he did have equal disposal efficiency with somebody who did get votes, other people had more impact in different ways, and I'll identify that shortly. The one vote for this game I gave to Jamara Ugle-Hagan. This is where the disposal efficiency comes into play again. 18 disposals at 50%. Now, he is a player that does definitely need to fix up that disposal efficiency, but he is really starting to find some form in this team without... his name has forgotten me. Last week it was without Aaron Norton. Aaron Norton came back in this week and he was still able to kind of show that continuity, so it's good to see him finding that kind of form. But he had 18 at 50%, 10 contested, 347 metres gained, 4 marks, 4 goals, 9 score involvements and the 1 tackle. Kicks 4 goals in a game where, they win by 47. He almost puts the dagger in the heart of Geelong off his own boot, really. And that flow could have been stemmed quite early, but I thought he played a really good game. The 2 vote I'm giving to Ed Richards. 29 disposals, again, 51%, matching Bontempelli. 14 contested for 568 metres gained. He had 9 clearances, so that's more than Bont. He had 5 marks, more than Bont. He kicked 2 goals, 7 score involvements, and 6 tackles. So, very similar stat line, but I think the 2 goals that Ed Richards kicked has him just ahead impact-wise. And best on for me was Adam Treloar, again, having an incredibly underrated season. 31 disposals at 74%, 10 contested, 574 metres gained, 6 clearances, 6 marks, 3 goals, 9 score involvements, and 8 tackles. Stiff to miss in the conversation, probably Tom Liberatore. 23 disposals at 69%, 10 contested, 338 metres gained, 7 clearances, 2 marks, 6 score involvements and 7 tackles. And for Geelong, you could probably raffle up one of either Tom Stewart, 26 disposals, but he only had the 50% disposal efficiency. I am loving that they're giving him more midfield time because he did rack up the 7 clearances and laid the 5 tackles. Max Holmes as well. I know the conditions called for a rather scrappy game, but when Max Holmes has 23 at 30%, but Rory Lobb has 21 at 90%, you know what I mean? Down at Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide hosted Richmond, and I didn't really give Richmond much of a chance this week, even as a Richmond man. We had no Tim Taranto due to concussion. Nick Vlosten was out due to a back niggle. Jack Graham out as well. No Dustin Martin, still added to the plethora of injuries that we had. And coming out of this game, Richmond Nankervis goes down with concussion, so he's going to miss this weekend against Collingwood, which is a huge game because I give Richmond every chance against Collingwood this week, given where both of their seasons are at. Connor Rozee subbed out of the game for Quinton Narkle with a hip injury, but I think that was probably more surrounded around being aware of the fact that they want to keep him on cotton wool a little bit, and given the scoreline at the time, they probably could have subbed him off. It wasn't until that substitution after three-quarter time, however, of Nankervis that Port Adelaide were able to run away with the game, and I am so proud of Richmond in this effort, and so much conversation has come out of this game, especially from Kane Cornes, and I can't fucking stand that guy. I don't understand how, as a media personality and a media expert, you can be so one-eyed biased against a team and be allowed to keep your job, because the anti-rhetoric and the anti-Richmond agenda this prick runs with every week fucking makes me sick. I cannot stand the prick. He's got a bee in his bonnet about the fact that we destroyed him in his final game. He obviously hates the fact that we went on to win a grand final off the back of fucking eliminating Port Adelaide in a prelim. We live rent-free in the guy's head. He can't fucking not take a jab at Richmond whenever he has the opportunity to do so. And he has come out against Adam Uze in this game, saying he wants to see a coach, not a cheerleader, because there were instances in this game where Richmond would kick a goal or two and it would cut to Uze on the bench, high-fiving his players and having a smile on his face. You know what? Richmond have been knocked from pillar to fucking post this year, and we've had all the injuries we've had. We're probably only going to win, if anything, maybe 2 games from the rest of the year. I give us a chance against Collingwood, and I give us a chance against North Melbourne. Outside of that, we probably finish on the bottom of the ladder with 2 to 3 wins, if we're lucky. If not, we finish bottom with only those 2. We haven't had much to look forward to. Over the last recent weeks, we have beaten Fremantle in the contested ball game, which we can hang our heads high about, even though the scoreline reflected a different game. GWS, we hung around all game. We lost by 4 goals, but we beat them in the contested ball game. Port Adelaide may have beaten us in contested ball quite convincingly in this game, but until Toby Nankervis was subbed out of the game, the largest margin Port Adelaide had was 20 points. The biggest margin they had at any break was the 10-point margin they took in at three-quarter time. And it was only then where a team playing against a Richmond outfit that had a lot of young players, 12 players under 50 games, 4 players under 5 games, ran out of legs and couldn't compete with a team that should be in a top 4 position, but are not. Why? Because they struggle to put teams away like Richmond early. Quarter time, 4 goals 2 playing 3 goals 3, was only 5 points. Richmond still in the hunt. At half time, only 8 points the difference. 7-8-50, playing 6-6-42. Three-quarter time, as I just said, 12-12-84, playing 11-8-74. The final scoreline, 16-20, defeating Richmond 11 goals 9. Richmond only going on to kick on that one behind for the last quarter. It was a very poor last quarter from Richmond by all means, don't get me wrong. This was a game as well that had a lot of, and I'm not at all blaming umpires for outcome here, I've identified why we lost. But when I'm watching a game of football and even the commentary team that you're listening to is baffled over some decisions, I don't understand. Charlie Dixon and Mitch Georgiades all game got away with pushing players in the back quite blatantly, and commentary team was saying, what's the point of defenders making front position if they're not going to be rewarded in contests anymore, especially with blatant pushes in the backs. Those free kicks given at the time, or non-free kicks, resulting in goals, shift momentum. And momentum can play against you in a big way, especially when Charlie Dixon comes into this game only kicking like 1 goal in 4 weeks, manages to get away with pushing in the back all game and kicks 4, and he's probably played himself back into form again. That being said, I can't fault the effort of Richmond up until three-quarter time. Again, we might have been smashed in stats, but when you look collectively at the year we've had, I take any small wins that we can, and I applaud Uze for having that air about him on the bench. And I was very bullish on him at the start of the year, being up in the coach's box and showing a little bit of disconnect. And ever since him coming down to the sidelines, we have seen a more emphatic response, not only from the Richmond players, but Adam Uze as a coach. It gives me more grounding that Adam Uze is our man. And I just find it laughable that Kane Cornes comes out with the comment saying he wants to see a coach, not a cheerleader, when Ken Hinkley is easily one of the biggest cheerleading coaches in the fucking competition. But when it comes to Kane Cornes, you can never get a word in negatively about Port Adelaide, even though he tries to run negative slants. We know he's only doing that to try to show that he's not biased. I mean, it only goes to show Zach Butters this week copped another $10,000 worth of fines, which now takes him up to almost $50,000 worth of dollars. I'm stumbling. $50,000 worth of fines the bastard has had this year. 5 or 6 different infractions, and yet he is still in Brownlow contention, no suspension. I am going to pose a question to you guys. If a player gets given X amount of fines or it totals X amount of money in a season, do you think the AFL should suspend that player? Personally, I think so, because a player like Zach Butters has gotten away with throwing punches and doing this shit off field, or on field, but off the ball rather, that has seen him get $50,000 worth of fines. Isaac Heaney makes accidental contact and he's instantly rubbed out for the Brownlow. So that's just me. That's just me. Looking at the stat line for this game, I am going to be giving a vote to a Richmond player this week. When you have a look though at the stats and this effort from this Richmond player in particular, he probably might even be in calculation for a Brownlow vote this game, because I thought even though there was a dominant finish by Port Adelaide, this player stood tall amongst a lot of sea of teal. The one vote I gave to Dan Houston. Not many people talking about Dan Houston out of this game, but I felt he set up a lot for Port Adelaide. 25 disposals at 76%, 3 contested, 472 metres gained, 3 clearances, 3 marks, 8 score involvements and 5 tackles. Rumour going around that he might want to be heading home to Melbourne, and I feel Richmond should have a very hard look at him if he's wanting to come back to a Melbourne-based team, especially with Jack Graham potentially looking to go to Port Adelaide. Maybe we could get a little trade going. I would personally love that. I don't think it would happen. I think if he would move, he'd move to a different club, but I would love to pick him up if he was available. The 2 vote I'm giving to Dan Rioli. 28 disposals, 71%, 9 contested, 631 metres gained, 1 clearance, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 2 goals, 4 tackles and 2 score involvements. I had him in the 2 ahead of Dan Houston for the 1 because of the 2 goals that Dan Rioli kicked as a half-back. I thought, given when he kicked them, he kept Richmond in the hunt, and he was quite far and beyond Richmond's best player for the game. Stiff to miss before I mention who I think was best on. Ollie Wines had 32 at 75% with 14 contested. Zach Butters had 28 disposals but only ran at 57%. He might have had the 6 score involvements as well, but I think Zach Butters for the first 3 quarters was very poor. Jace Burgoyne was serviceable off the wing, 24 at 75%. For Richmond, Dion Prestia had 24 at 75% with 6 score involvements. Jacob Hopper had 25, but only ran at 48%. Liam Baker had a solid game, 6 score involvements, 6 tackles, 21 disposals. But I thought Connor Rozee was probably best on and was hard to stop around crucial contests. 24 disposals at 66%, 13 contested for 260 metres gained, 7 clearances, 5 marks, 2 goals, 1, 8 score involvements and 4 tackles. While I'm at it, I want to add that I think Logan Evans was stiff to miss a nomination for the Rising Star Award this week. He had 22 disposals at 81%, 9 marks, 1 goal, 8 score involvements. Collectively, looking back at the fixture, I think Dowling for Adelaide was stiff to miss as well, given the averages that guy has had this year. And he had a pretty big game against Essendon as well when we have a look at the stat line. 19 disposals, 8 contested, 5 clearances, 7 marks, 1 goal, and the 1 tackle as well. When you have a look at the fact that it was Nick Watson that got the nomination this week, he might have kicked a handful of goals, but I think there's been players that have been better for a longer period of time this year. And by this time of the season, players are getting nominated off of the body of work versus 1 or 2 games. And I think Dowling and Evans have had a better body than Watson has. Just my opinion. Game of the round, arguably game of the year, arguably grand final kind of preview went down at the Gabba with Brisbane hosting Sydney in a game that was an arm wrestle and a tale of two halves, and it was anybody's game. It was truly looking like it was going to blow out one way, and then it came back, and then it went one way, and then it came back, and it ended in a 2-point victory to Brisbane at home. When you look at the scoreline, it could have been game over at any point here. At quarter time, Brisbane led 5-1 to 1-3, and writing could have been on the wall at that point if it wasn't for the fact that Sydney at halftime led 7-4 to 6-3. For the next quarter, Brisbane only went on to register 10 points. Sydney went on to register 18. And then to think after that, Sydney only managed to notch up 13 points. Brisbane went on to notch up 30. It was a true arm wrestle. It was down to the wire. It was nitty and gritty. I loved every minute of it. There were some contentious decisions and non-calls. Sydney ended with 2 injuries on the day. I don't know how severe they are, but Dane Rampy with a calf injury, Tom Papley with an ankle injury. It was Dane Rampy that got subbed out in the second quarter with that calf for Corey Warner. The non-decisions I'm talking about is there were a couple of calls that probably should have been called as tunnelling. Eric Hipwood probably lucky to not get fined or suspended for the tunnel that he undertook against Nick Blakey, because that was as blatant a tunnel as I've ever seen, and the umpire just called play on. But there were some comprehensive individual performances. This was a game where you couldn't really nitpick or fault the individual performances of some, and this was a game where surprisingly, both for Brisbane and Sydney, their best players were locked down. I mean, Lachie Neale ended up finishing with a servable performance, but he got locked down hard by James Jordan. And similarly, on the other side of the spectrum, Isaac Heaney, to his standard, was shut down by Josh Dunkley in parts, and taking out both of those players really opened up opportunity for others to shine. And when you look at this scoreline and you take out the fact that Lachie Neale and Isaac Heaney had little to no influence on the game, it's incredible to think what could have been if either of them got off the chain. And if this is the grand final preview we're getting, we're going to be in for one hell of a grand final this year. Looking at the stats for best on, probably pretty clean cut here. As I said, Isaac Heaney and Lachie Neale not in the conversation this week. Isaac Heaney had the 19 for only 63%. Had 11 contested, however, 299 metres gained, 6 clearances, 3 marks, 5 score involvements and 6 tackles. So he had influence, but not as influential, especially with hitting the scoreboard. Lachie Neale only had 18 disposals at 66%, 7 contested, 6 clearances, 4 score involvements and 4 tackles. Didn't hit the scoreboard. He has been recently. Other players of note that didn't make a vote this week, probably Chad Warner, 20 disposals, 70%, 6 marks, 1 goal, 8 score involvements, laying the 1 tackle. Matt Roberts in defence had 23 at 87%, had 8 marks, 5 score involvements and 4 tackles as well. Robbie Fox, 26 disposals at 80%, had 10 marks, 4 score involvements and 4 tackles. Oscar McInerney had a good game in the ruck, 22 disposals, 77%, 27 hitouts, 9 clearances, 5 marks. I thought he beat Brodie Grundy quite convincingly on the day, which is quite surprising given the output we know Brodie Grundy can put in. But the 3-2-1 I landed on, I think will probably be the 3-2-1 for the game overall. The one missing, Dane Zorko, probably very stiff here. 29 disposals at 69%, 5 contested, 627 metres gained, 1 clearance, 12 marks, 3 score involvements and 3 tackles. Could have been in the conversation for the one, but I gave it to Cam Rayner. 20 disposals at 70%, 9 contested, 392 metres gained, 6 clearances, 4 marks, 2 goals, 1, 6 score involvements and 7 tackles. The 2 vote I gave to Errol Goulden. 27 disposals at 66%, 8 contested for 449 metres gained, 2 clearances, 7 marks, 1 goal, 6 score involvements and 4 tackles. But best on ground for me was Hugh McCluggage, who was really coming into his own. 26 disposals, only at 57%, but he had 7 contested for 465 metres gained, 4 clearances, 8 marks, 3 goals, 1, 6 score involvements and 1 tackle on the day. Earlier this year, we saw Fremantle knock Melbourne off by close enough to 100 points, and we questioned whether or not they were going to be a premiership threat and whether this was just a blip on the radar, whether we would ever see this performance from Fremantle again. They backed it up with a 50-point win in the rematch, which shows that the first time was not a fluke. 17-14, 116, defeated Melbourne 10-6. Again, story of the tape for the last couple of weeks of Melbourne has been that without Max Gawn, they have struggled to get first use in the midfield. Salem got subbed out of this game with a tight hamstring injury, which was in the... No, he wasn't even subbed out. So he had a tight hamstring. He probably just ended the game on the bench. For Fremantle, Jackson ended the game with a corked calf and Pearce come off with an arm injury. And that was a substitution in the third quarter for James Aish. I don't know how that looms for Pearce moving forward. Again, when speaking of all-Australian captaincy contention, I feel Alex Pearce is one that is not spoken about that very much should be. But the conversation here needs to be had about both teams and where they're at. Melbourne have been without Christian Petrarca for weeks now, and that has been glaringly apparent. The biggest thing that has let Melbourne's system down is the fact that trading Brodie Grundy out of their team this last year heading into this year means that when Max Gawn went down, they didn't have a backup. They traded for Tom Fullerton, who come down from Brisbane, playing well in the VFL, and still can't get a call up into this team. I don't understand why they're not giving him opportunity when they've got him as a ready-made backup ruckman. Can't compete to the level of Max Gawn, and I don't think anybody's expecting him to do so. But the fact that they're not picking him at all, I don't understand. I mean, Max Gawn's available for selection this week, I believe, but it might be too little too late for Melbourne. Looking at their run home, I've got them maybe winning 2 out of their next 5. I don't think that's going to be good enough considering the teams that are playing around them. On the flip side, Fremantle should notch up a top 4 finish here and will probably be one of the biggest talking points of the 2024 season, because I feel if Fremantle can finish in the top 4, they are every chance to make a prelim, if not push for the grand final. And they're my dark horse selection. They have been my dark horse selection for a couple of months now, and I'm going to ride that to the bank all the way to the grand final. I'm giving Fremantle every fucking opportunity to get there. 3-2-1 for this game, no surprisingly, is straight Fremantle. The ones stiff to miss, however, I will mention Hayden Young, 28 disposals at 64%, 13 contested, 593 metres gained, 8 clearances, 3 marks, 9 score involvements and the 1 tackle. Luke Ryan had 24 for 91% with 7 marks and 5 score involvements. Jordan Clark had 23 at 87%. With 3 clearances, 5 marks, the 1 goal and 8 score involvements as well. For Melbourne, Stephen May, as you would come to expect, a defensive threat, 26 disposals at 80%, plucked the 9 marks. Jack Viney, 23 disposals at 60%, but he's been down on output, only laying the 2 tackles. This is a guy that we're used to seeing 5, 6, 7, 8 tackles out of a game. And Trent Rivers, putting a very good body of work together at Melbourne this year. 19 disposals at 73%, 9 contested, 4 marks, 3 score involvements and 4 tackles. But the 3-2-1 I gave out this week, I landed on Josh Tracy for the 1, 18 disposals at 55%, 7 contested for 464 metres gained, 12 marks, 3 goals, 9 score involvements and 2 tackles. If the door is open for any trades to be had between Richmond and Fremantle this year, I would love for Richmond to push the fact with Josh Tracy if they haven't locked him up on a long-term deal by the end of the year, because we are begging for a full forward, and I would love to see him in Richmond colours because he is impressive to watch. The 2 vote I gave to Andrew Brayshaw, 41 disposals at 75%, 13 contested for 551 metres gained, 4 clearances, 3 marks, 7 score involvements, and 3 tackles. And best on ground, Caleb Sarong, 36 disposals at 77%, 15 contested, 423 metres gained, 7 clearances, 4 marks, 1 goal, 8 score involvements, and 5 tackles. Let me know in the comment section down below if you're on board with my thought process of Fremantle being a threat come the final series this year, because I'd love to see if anybody's on board with that theory. The final game of the round, very contentious. It was very stiff to end on a contentious game, one of which has got me in trouble on social media this week, surprise, surprise. But at Marvel Stadium, Carlton fought off a very valiant North Melbourne team, only falling over the line by 19 points in a game where North Melbourne, led by 11 at half-time, was still very much in the hunt at three-quarter time, wrestled the stat line back, and it wasn't until some non-decisions paid North Melbourne's way, or not paid North Melbourne's way rather, and Carlton having some paid their way in the way of free kicks, got them over the line. And the conversation point I have had is Carlton have now played North Melbourne twice this year. Both games have ended up in Carlton being gifted goals that have decided the outcome of the game. And we only need to rewind as far back as Good Friday. I think it was 6 50-metre penalties paid. 9 goals total were kicked from free kicks. This game, very similar. There were many non-decisions that weren't paid for North inside their forward 50. Carlton get the ball up the other end and they either score off of those non-decisions or they somehow find free kicks of their own. I brought up a stat that some people called me out for, some people actually applauded me for doing my work, but Carlton currently are the number 1 rated team on goals kicked from free kicks this year. Charlie Curnow has kicked the most goals this year of any player from free kicks. Harry Mackay is not far off that marker either. No surprising that these free kicks have been coming and Charlie Curnow has been reaping the benefit, and he'll win a third Coleman off of it. And that's not discrediting Charlie Curnow. He's a great player, but when you've got a player who is consistently awarded free kicks for very minor things, but then you have a look at free kicks that he should be coughing up but the umpires let go, that's where the disparity comes from. And it only seems to be Carlton supporters that don't see that fact or want to argue that fact or think it's funny when other people try to bring up that fact. I know every team has a certain amount of supporters within their kind of fraternities that are too one-eyed to see when other people are correct in decision making and some opinions in the way that I've just spoken about. But it's very hard to convince a Carlton supporter that they have been kissed on the dick by umpires this year. Having a look at the injuries, De Koning out for the rest of the year with a foot injury. That could be doom and gloom for Carlton's top 4 chances, I feel. Sam Walsh with a back injury, but however, he is trained all right this week and he is expected to play. Tom De Koning, I think, is going to be the biggest out for Carlton, and a lot of Carlton supporters that I know of are now saying that could put a strike through their year, only because Tom De Koning, even though Mark Pitney might be able to hold his own in the ruck, he's no Tom De Koning. Tom De Koning has been vastly superior in the ruck. He'll end up being the number 1 ruckman in the competition over the next couple of years, and he'll take over the moniker of Max Gawn. I'm telling you right now, I love what this kid does. Mark Pitney does not play at the same level, and they're going to be missing Tom De Koning rather severely. For this game, however, we're looking at the 3-2-1. I have given the 3 vote to somebody who might cause a little bit of controversy here, given that some people are going to say that others deserved it more than who I've given it to. But talking about players that missed out this week, Sam Walsh doesn't get a vote. 25 disposals, 60%, 8 contested, 529 metres gained, 4 clearances, 8 score involvements and 7 tackles. Bailey Scott had a good outing for North Melbourne, 25 disposals at 88%, 6 marks, 1 goal, 7 score involvements and 3 tackles. Davey Juniak went about his way, 23 disposals at 82% with 11 contested, 9 clearances led by 6 score involvements and 5 tackles. I landed on a 1 vote for Charlie Curnow, despite saying that he kicked a lot of goals off of fucking free kicks. I know it's probably counterproductive, but he did have 15 at 80%. He had 9 marks, 4 goals, 8 score involvements and the 1 tackle. it was, even though they came from free kicks, still 4 goals is a good outing, especially in a contest that falls the way where those 4 goals dictate the game. The 2 vote I've given to Patrick Cripps, who a lot of people are probably going to say I stiffed him for the 3, but he had 29 at 82%, 14 contested for 302 metres gained, 1 hit out, 9 clearances, 3 marks, 9 score involvements and 7 tackles. But I gave best on ground here to Harry Sheezel, 35 disposals at 80%, 10 contested for 313 metres gained, 3 clearances, 7 marks, 2 goals, 5 score involvements and 4 tackles. Patrick Cripps might have had bigger clearance numbers, but I feel the fact that Harry Sheezel was able to have more marks around the ground, almost as many tackles, almost as many score involvements, and hit the board with 2 goals of his own, he was more impactful for North than what Patrick Cripps was for Carlton. Makes sense to me. I know it's not going to make sense to others, but hey, that's how it fell. So after 19 rounds of football, this is how our AFL ladder shapes up, and it is still wide open to probably 13th place if everything falls right and other teams fall down, but I would probably say from 11th very much to 2nd, it is still open season. Our top 4 is Sydney, Carlton, Brisbane and Fremantle, with GWS, Geelong, Port Adelaide and Essendon rounding out the top 8. Now, from 2nd to 11th, only 2 games separate them. The Bulldogs, Melbourne and Hawthorn currently only sit 1 win out of the top 8, with Gold Coast and Collingwood sitting 2 wins out of the top 8. Adelaide sit in 14th, all probably done and dusted for them this year, with St Kilda, West Coast, North Melbourne and Richmond rounding out your bottom 4. With the round officially recapped, there is only one thing for us to do, and that is to have a look at how the MVP award is shaping up after 19 rounds by identifying our top 10. And we're starting to get a more definitive top 10, given the fact that some of the ties on votes are starting to separate themselves, and we've had a lot of player movement coming out of round 19. So in 10th place on equal 16 votes, we have Zach Butters and Sam Walsh. In 9th place, on equal 17 votes, we have Jack Steele and Lockie Whitfield. In 8th place, on equal 20 votes, we have Errol Goulden and Adam Treloar. In 7th place, on 21 votes, we have Marcus Bontempelli. And in 6th place, on 23 votes, we have Patrick Cripps. Now again, I've identified in the last couple of rounds, I was probably a little bit blind to the impact he was having at the start of the year, and he probably should be 4, 5, 6 votes higher than he is now. That's my bad, but hey, that's the beauty of being an opinion-based kind of decision-making process when it comes to these votes, right? Top 5, currently, 1 vote ahead of Patrick Cripps. In 5th position is Lockie Neal with 24 votes. In 4th place, we have Nick Dacos on 25 votes. In 3rd place, we have Caleb Sarong on 26 votes. In 2nd place, on 30 votes, we have Zach Merritt. And in 1st place, clinging onto the lead still only because he had a huge jump at the start of the year, is Isaac Heaney on 31 votes, being hunted down by Zach Merritt, and it is open season for Caleb Sarong, Nick Dacos, Lockie Neal, Patrick Cripps, and Marcus Bontempelli. And you probably can't even rule out Errol Goulden and Adam Treloar if they can have some best ons as well. As I said last week, I feel this Brownlow this year is going to be a lot closer than what people think. And a lot of people are saying Patrick Cripps and Marcus Bontempelli, but they're disregarding Neal, Dacos, Sarong, Merritt. I think those players can all rise up and do some damage on that leaderboard come the end of the year. It's going to be very interesting to watch. And that officially rounds up the recap podcast, ladies and gentlemen, for round 19. Do hope you guys enjoyed. I love sitting back and recording these. It might take a little bit longer in the week to get them out. I want to start getting them out a little bit earlier, but hey, we're getting it done, and that's what counts. Thank you for taking the time to join me. Let me know down below. I posted to you guys last week. Do you want to see this also brought out as an audio formatted podcast that I upload to Spotify and other podcast platforms that you can just listen to instead of having to sit back and watch? Moving on next year, I'm looking forward to bringing in special guests every week. Some close friends of mine that barrack for different teams, so we can kind of talk footy from different angles when it comes to their teams and stuff like that. If that's something you would like to see or love to get involved in, let me know in the comments down below. Again, if you've got any recommendations for content you would like to see me make, sound off as well. People have already recommended mock drafts, which I'm definitely going to be doing. Podcasts to cover the trade period and draft period, I'm definitely going to be doing. And I'm looking at doing some other stuff as well. So definitely stay tuned for all of that. And as I said, if you've got any ideas, any at all, comment down below. Let me know. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.